Did you know your gut health may be linked to joint pain, autoimmunity, and even obesity? Stay tuned as we unravel the mysteries of the gut microbiome and its surprising connections to these health challenges. Welcome to the Hashimoto's Doctor podcast. You're now part of a growing community of people determined to take their health back through education and self-empowerment. But because of the healthcare system today, we don't have access to the types of healthcare that we want. So we have to do things differently. We've got to do things smarter, and we do that by becoming our own advocates. This podcast will give you the perspective and thoughts of one of the world's leading Hashimoto's doctors. So let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Hashimoto's Doctor podcast. I'm your host, Brad Shook, and today we're going to talk about a really fascinating topic that just never ceases to amaze me. It seems like there's new research that's coming out every month on the gut microbiome, and this is the population of bacteria and microorganisms in your digestive tract. And this group of microorganisms has such a significant impact on not only your GI tract, but your immune system and really your systemic health. And today we're going to discuss some of the connections that it has between conditions like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune condition, and it's one that I work with quite a bit. But this is really applies to just about any autoimmune condition because the gut microbiome has a significant impact on inflammation and systemic inflammation, the inflammation that can occur throughout the body. And this really is fascinating how it's not just the intestinal tract, but it's also how these bacteria seem to control and help with regulating the immune response. And we'll get more into that as we go. But this also has the gut microbiome also appears to have a really significant connection to joint pain and inflammation and even obesity. I mean, a lot of people think that, they're obese because they just overeat or, that's how it's oftentimes simplified, which is not, that's not the case. I mean, most people have other issues metabolically that are leading to their obesity. And of course, you have to consider when you're talking about obesity or body weight that there is an issue that always has to be considered with the law of thermodynamics. You cannot eat more than you're able to burn each day. But there is a very significant impact on your metabolism that is related to inflammation. And the gut microbiome has such a significant impact. There are even different types of bacteria that appear to extract more calories from the food that you eat. So there are a lot of potential connections here that I want to get into. But we're going to explore this connection, and I'm going to discuss the functional medicine approach, which is really, functional medicine is a systems biology approach. And what that means is you're just trying to consider all of the systems of the body and how they're interconnected, and if there are any problems with the various bodily systems that could be contributing to dysfunction elsewhere. And this is it's really more of an approach where you try to consider a lot of other factors than just, someone, for example, having joint pain or just being, an autoimmune condition and the inflammation that comes from that. It's like, well, what is contributing to this? And this is where you really take, you step back and you try to take a more holistic approach but I like to refer to it as systems biology approach because it's not this conceptual model that's not based in any type of science or fact. It's actually just trying to be a better physiologist, taking more time to look in depth at the person's health history and really surveying and being considerate of other factors that might be impacting and driving the problems that they're having. And there are a lot of training courses and things that you can consider if you're a clinician or someone that's listening to this. There are a number of different programs that you can go through to gain an appreciation for how other systems of the body can impact systemic health or immune function or metabolism. And a lot of those courses go really deep into the new literature that's out there that you're really not going to hear anywhere else. You're not going to hear in a conventional medical continuing education seminar anything about functional medicine or systems biology approach. You're just not going to get it because a lot of the tools that are going to be used in a functional medicine approach are going to be dietary, lifestyle, and maybe nutraceuticals or vitamins and minerals, herbs that you can utilize to support the physiology. But really, this approach is just trying to be a better physiologist and understand the mechanisms at a deeper level and how we might be able to intervene or support that person's body through utilizing these tools of diet, lifestyle, and maybe temporary supplementation. So let's get into it. Obesity is a huge problem, and it has been linked to osteoarthritis. The wear and tear arthritis is how it's commonly referred to. But did you know that the obesity has been connected because increased body weight leads to increased compressive forces on the joints, especially the load-bearing joints, right? The spine, the hips, the knees, the ankles, where you're carrying the weight of the body. And so then that leads to increased compression of the joint, which with movement would lead to increased wear and then accelerated degeneration. That's the primary connection that, classically how obesity is linked to osteoarthritis. But it's not just about the extra weight on the joints. There's emerging research that suggests that there's actually a profile for the gut or types of bacteria that may actually predispose someone to gaining more weight. And it's characterized by certain types of bacteria that may lead to increased extraction of calories from the food that you eat, and also contribute to bacteria or bacterial profiles that contribute to systemic inflammation. And that systemic inflammation is going to lead to accelerated joint degeneration. So the gut has this really strong connection there. It's also involved, the gut microbiome is very, very closely connected to the immune system and the different types of, when we talk about the gut, we want to think of a few things. We want to think about the bacteria that are present. We commonly hear that referred to as the microbiome. And then we want to also think about the foods and the things that you eat and the types of fibers in the foods that you eat, or the types of sugars, or just what you're consuming, how that can feed and change the bacteria that are in your gut. And that would be those would be prebiotics, things that come before the bacteria, or that feed and can influence the microbial profile and chemistry. And then we want to think about not just the bacteria that are present, which we said was a microbiome, but we also want to think about postbiotics, the things that the bacteria produce as a result of their metabolism. So we want to think about the prebiotics, the things coming in, the bacteria present, and then what they make. And so the bacterial profile that's present may be one that is inflammatory. It may be one that produces or does not produce enough of postbiotics that your gut lining needs to stay healthy. And you have immune cells that are, all along the intestinal tract, and if you think of the intestinal lining as a wall. And on one side of the wall, you have the inside of the digestive tract, where all of your food is digesting, and all the microbiome and the bacteria are present. And on that side of the wall, you have a few layers of mucus that line the intestinal tract. That's normal. That's healthy. And then you have on the other side of the wall, you have the bloodstream, and you have a lot of immune cells there, and different types of immune cells. And these immune cells, you have certain types of immune cells that are able to adhere to the intestinal lining on the side of where the bloodstream is, and able to create an appendage-like projection that they can insert between the cells that line the intestinal wall and sample the internal environment of your digestive tract. And then from there, it can take the cell can then retract and pull the appendage back in, and then take that to other immune cells where they sample that environment in the gut, and then they create and respond, the immune system responds accordingly. So what's inside the gut has a dramatic impact on the immune system, and that can either be something that promotes inflammation or something that is, keeps it rather calm. So this is a really important connection, and so that can drive an inflammatory response, or that can calm down inflammation significantly. So the type of bacteria that are present are significant. The things that are coming in, the prebiotics, the food that you're eating, has a real significant impact on the types of bacteria that are present, and then the subsequent production of postbiotics, right? Things like short chain fatty acids that are made by the gut bacteria, different types of vitamins and minerals, things that actually support or can actually impair the intestinal tract lining and can have a really strong influence on the immune response. So if we can improve our gut health, and we have a few different things that we can do. We can change our food. We can actually try to change the gut bacteria. We can diminish or try to. One of the things that I think is helpful is, when I work with someone, I always look at a dietary journal. Always look at their diet and see what they're currently eating, and then we can decide based on what's happening with their gut, if they're really symptomatic, or depending on the problems that they're having, if there's an immune connection to the problems, the problem that they're having that they want help with. Let's say I work a lot with autoimmunity, but let's just say someone with osteoarthritis, and maybe they have Hashimoto's. Maybe they have an autoimmune thyroid condition. The most common autoimmune condition in the United States is Hashimoto's. So let's say they have a thyroid problem, and then they have some osteoarthritis. Let's say they have a hip or a knee, or maybe both. And we're just saying, okay, well, what's going on? How is there anything that we can do to support a better adaptive physiological state? Is the body kind of in a pro-inflammatory state? And of course, we would want to look then at biomarkers. We'd want to do some laboratory testing to look at biomarkers, and a lot of standard labs that you could do. The most basic, complete blood count with differential, looking at white blood cells, red blood cells, and looking and seeing what's there. Getting inflammatory markers, and looking at those: C-reactive protein, homocysteine, maybe a sedimentation rate, a few things to give us an idea about tissue inflammation, and then you can go much deeper with other testing. You could look at the immune system more. We could, depending on how they presented, what kind of issues they're having, what type of budget they have to, you could get more specialized testing. Like you could do one of these, a comprehensive stool profile that looks at and tries to profile the gut microbiome to give you an idea if you're dealing with any bacteria that may be dysbiotic or imbalanced. And you can also get, with that information from the gut microbiome, you can get what are called stool chemistries, and it can give you an idea about inflammatory chemistry in the gut. It can give you an idea about the production or lack of production of short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, which is one that's been shown to be very critical and helpful with improving gut health, and also with supporting the immune system. So you can get a better profile, and then sometimes we'll do more testing. It really depends on how the person presents and what their issues are, and what they would like to try first, what their budget is. All those things factor in. But sometimes you can just you can look at everything, and you might say, well, what, and one of the most effective or easiest things that we could try, especially let's say they're having some GI symptoms, or they have an autoimmune issue, and depending on their diet, you could say, okay, let's consider changing the diet for a short period of time, eliminating certain foods, making sure that we get adequate consumption of other types of foods that have, let's say, prebiotics, for example, a good amount of these fibers, and also polyphenols, a diverse color in the diet with sufficient protein. Protein is absolutely critical to get a sufficient amount of protein in there too, and then remove a lot of things that tend to be inflammatory, or that might not be good for the gut, like a real simple one, which a lot of people know, I think. But for example, like sugar would be a good one to remove, as that can feed opportunistic bacteria and tends to lead to bacterial changes and fungal changes in the gut that are more associated with negative outcomes and consequences, people tend to do better. So you could say, based on the information that you have, you could change the dietary strategy and see how that affects how the person's feeling and functioning. You do that for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and kind of see where they are. And then you could also consider adding in some nutritional supplementation and things to support the gut and see if you could further make improvements in how they're feeling and functioning. So these are all things to take into consideration, but one of the most important things to understand here is there's this really strong connection between the gut microbiome and the immune system. And this is really, there's a lot of evolving science. What I really can kind of lean to here as far as the strategy that I take is, I've gone through a lot of courses and training in functional medicine and in a systems biology approach, which is a theoretical model of how to support optimal health, how to support the immune system. It's based on a lot of research and emerging research and things that have been discovered, and it takes that data and tries to incorporate it into a strategy to help optimize the health, optimize the immune system response, which a lot of times means just getting it to be better regulated and really, improve the person's overall systemic health. And the model that I've seen work clinically tends to be what I've described, with the dietary strategy and then also lifestyle factors we want to take into consideration because they do influence the gut microbiome. A lot of people might not realize, but exercise influences your gut microbiome, sleep influences your gut microbiome, stress influences your gut microbiome because these are living, bacteria that are present in the gut, and they respond to our physiology and to the stresses and things that we are under. So we have this symbiotic relationship with them. So the clinical model that I've seen work clinically, right? So part of this is like training in like a theoretical approach that a lot of people think works and have seen work in their practice, and that's one of the things that the training that you go through if you're interested in functional medicine or systems biology approach, you learn from people that are applying these things in practice and from research that's been done and that's being done, and you take this information and you try to incorporate it into a strategy that is going to help support someone's health. So what I have seen in combination with my training and the information I've learned from that, and then the clinical side, which is like, does it work, is that you can make a big difference in how someone feels and functions. You can decrease inflammation significantly. You can dampen autoimmunity in a lot of cases. And using a strategy similar to what I mentioned, pulling on the levers of like diet, lifestyle, and maybe temporary supplementation, can be very effective. Now, are there other ways than what I have mentioned? I'm sure that there are. There are many different dietary strategies out there that I think are showing promise, and so I'm always open to learning new information and trying to adjust and have as many tools as I can to try to help someone. Does the approach that I'm talking about help everyone? No, I've worked with people that despite everything that we can do, we can't improve what's happening to them. We can't improve their inflammatory response. We can't dampen their autoimmunity. But those cases are not the they're more of the exception than the rule. I mean, so we don't say that that's not what usually happens. However, it's really important to understand that we all have so many external factors that are influencing our state of inflammation and just using state of inflammation as one simple thing to kind of focus on, that the inflammatory process could be driven by many things. I mean, it could be something like the something that you're breathing in that's triggering an inflammatory response that you're not really aware of. Maybe you live in a home that has a lot of mold in it and you're breathing in VOCs and mold spores. Maybe you have mold colonization, and that is contributing to the release of mycotoxins, which are released by some molds that can be really toxic, hence toxin, mycotoxin in their name, and that can be a major factor for driving an inflammatory response. And we can talk about food, and we can talk about these bacteria, and though those things may help, they may not if the major factor is something else, especially if you don't it's hard to consider everything. And even when I'm working with people that can do, every test that we could imagine to try to help us work up and get a better starting point, you can't always figure it out. So it's important. I want to just, mention and make sure to put it in perspective that what I'm talking about is not a panacea, but it definitely, clinically, I see it work more than I don't. And I see it improve people far more than I don't see this type of strategy improve health. So when you're talking about the gut microbiome, it tends to be a real critical keystone aspect of systemic health. Because it plays such a significant role in impacting the systemic inflammation of the body. And that can have a real profound impact on osteoarthritis and autoimmune conditions. I mean, significantly impact autoimmune conditions, and because of the immune regulating effect that a healthy gut microbiome can have. Okay, so that's really what it comes down to. And when you start looking at obesity as well, I mean, people that are obese and really all chronic disease processes have been linked to what? Inflammation, some sort of inflammation. So anything that you can do to address inflammation, especially if you can address a causative factor of inflammation, it can have a really significant system-wide impact. And that's really what, a lot of times what I'm trying to do when I'm working with people clinically is how can I have them make, one change to get, to get the greatest benefit. Like rather than trying to get people to change everything to get maybe a minimal benefit, what's the big domino? What's the major thing that if we can change, we might be able to get a more significant, systemic, and prolonged positive change in their health. So quite a few things to consider here, but it's really interesting with obesity how there's this connection to inflammation as well. And like many chronic diseases, they're almost all of them are rooted in chronic inflammation. So the gut can have a significant role. Chronic inflammation can interfere with our hormonal physiology, with our neurological signaling. It really is very disruptive to optimal human health. So addressing the driving factors, the root causes can be really important. And this is where the gut, really very significantly plays a role. So these are some of the things that I would keep in mind, and a few of the things that I wanted to share. But this connection to osteoarthritis, to autoimmunity, and to obesity, obesity, osteoarthritis definitely is driven and exacerbated by extra body weight, by obesity. But it may be that the obesity is also being driven by a chronic inflammatory process that's also contributing to, that chronic inflammation also contributing to more inflammation and more pain that's leading to more rapid osteoarthritic changes, wearing out of the joints. So it's not just the compressive forces. And, this is all connected. It's really an immune connection to the gut. Okay, so let's go into some real quick tips on things that you might want to consider doing to support better gut health and decrease inflammation. And as always, this is informational in nature. Please talk to your doctor before you make any changes or do anything that I'm suggesting may be beneficial here. So first of all, it's obvious, I think, based on the discussion so far, focusing on your gut health can be a very potent way to reduce inflammation and manage a lot of inflammatory conditions. And you might want to focus on the addition or consumption of prebiotic fibers. Remember, we said there are three things we really want to, things we want to consider and levers that we can pull to have an influence on the gut, right? We talked about three things. Prebiotics, the things that come in as part of your diet that feed the bacteria. Then the bacteria themselves, like taking and consuming probiotics, eating fermented foods can be helpful. Changing the gut bacteria can be very beneficial. Even sometimes we even need to utilize, and what I'll do in practice is if we have evidence that we have bacteria that are unfavorable, that there's overgrowth, we will use sometimes some antimicrobials, some things to help support balancing the gut bacteria. And then third, the postbiotics. What are the status of the postbiotics in the digestive tract? Sometimes you'll see inflammatory markers. Sometimes you'll see here you can look at short chain fatty acids, which are really some of the most important postbiotics that I would like to mention. Things like butyrate are absolutely critical for optimal GI tract lining health and immune responsiveness. It can help with really helping to modulate the immune response, because it can be so impactful on the health of the gut lining. So prebiotics, right, the fibers, the probiotics, the bacteria, and then the postbiotics, the things that the bacteria make. Those are three key things that we can look at here. So starting with the prebiotics, the simplest thing and one of the most effective things is dietarily. And again, this is not going to necessarily work for everyone, but clinically, I've seen that this tends to be effective. Do we have to tweak things for people based on their individual responses sometimes? Absolutely. So, but in general, prebiotics, yes, you could take a fiber supplement that has a diverse array of fibers to feed your gut bacteria. Okay, you could do that, but you could also eat food, which is what I would really, advocate and encourage, because food is such a powerful influence on our overall health, and it's really communicating to our cells a lot of information other than just the fiber content and proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, which it's often reduced down to in people's thinking, and that's not a good way to look at it. I mean, it really is a unique form of information that our bodies have, are designed to work with and gain information directly from. So food is information. Food can be very powerful at modulating the immune system and communicating to the body a lot of important signals, what you might call epigenetic signals that influence our genetic expression. So food is the number one thing to consider here. And in particular, like I said earlier, diverse plant-based fibers, so from vegetables and fruit, diverse colors. If you can get the colors of the rainbow every day, that's what I advocate. Probably 7 to 9 servings of fruits and vegetables. And I know that may sound like a lot. The average American gets very few servings of fruits and vegetables. And listen, again, I don't want to repeat myself too much here, but there are other ways to do this. And there are some elimination diets, like for example, like the carnivore community that eats nothing but meat, and there are people thriving doing that. They're thriving doing that. And so, that is, I'm not saying that that's unreasonable at all, but what I'm saying is that clinically, what I've seen that works for a lot of people, and I do have people that we have to remove certain types of fibers and things that there are things that they can't eat that much, or they start to have GI problems. They have bloating and distension and other issues that seem to exacerbate their symptoms. So it's not always perfect for everyone, but the majority of people that I've worked with, they want to keep a diverse diet. They like eating varied foods. And if we can do that, then that's what I try to help them do. And I've seen clinically that this diversity of plant-based fibers, this diversity of color, and absolutely adequate protein. I'm not going to minimize that. It's not like I'm not advocating a low protein diet at all. Most people are deficient in protein. They need way more protein than they're getting to help support their physiology, their healing, and that's one of the reasons that they're oftentimes sick, is because they're not consuming enough protein. And but this diversity of fibers and diversity of color really helps to support diversity of gut bacteria and the abundance of the gut bacteria, which for the most part and clinically I've observed to be a better strategy at getting people systemically healthier and better controlling the inflammatory response. Well, are there exceptions? For sure, there are. Everyone's individual, and you have to respect everyone individually and their responses and preferences, and do the best that you can with people. But the prebiotics and food is one of your primary levers. Okay. The second thing are the probiotics, so the types of bacteria that are present in the gut. So again, if there are unfavorable gut bacteria, you might want to eliminate some of those. Like I will commonly utilize gentle herbal antimicrobials that can be effective, but you also can put bacteria in, which may be a better strategy than taking an antimicrobial approach. Actually, using a probiotic approach, putting bacteria in and encouraging colonization and changes in the gut microbiome with the prebiotic fibers plus the bacteria. So fermented foods tend to be really helpful for a lot of people, not everyone. Some people are very sensitive to histamines, and so eating things like fermented foods can be higher in histamines, and that can bother some people. But in general, sauerkraut, kimchi, and you have to be careful with kimchi. Some people do not react well to nightshade family of vegetables and fruits, I guess, because tomatoes in there, but the nightshade family can be very exacerbate a lot of conditions. It's one thing that I personally don't do very well with, so I keep nightshades out. But kimchi can be very powerful. It has a lot of different types of bacteria. You can get what I think is called a white kimchi, which does not have nightshades added to it. So that's something to look into. But sauerkraut, kimchi, really almost anything fermented. Kefir or kefir, however you want to pronounce it, is also something that can be really helpful, but just not kefir with sugar added. So I get kefir that is made with whole milk that has no sugar added. So if it's fermented, it ferments, and it's kind of like a thick, almost like a thick. It's almost like a runny yogurt is probably a better way to say it, like a runny yogurt, and it's kind of like sour cream. So it's not bad, and you don't have to drink a lot of it, but I'll have like a quarter cup or so per day, and I do well with that. Now, if someone has a lactose issue or they react to casein, the proteins in dairy, which a ton of people do, then that's probably not the best option. And I would recommend maybe trying like a coconut version or something. But you want to get the fermented foods tend to be really helpful for a lot of people at getting gut bacteria in high quantities. Now, of course, you can take a probiotic supplement, and there are a few different types of probiotics that people tend to, when I'm working with people, I want to try to blend into their dietary strategy to improve their gut health, and that tends to be spore-based probiotics, which are like soil-based. So they're microorganisms you might find more in the soil. And then there are some of the more commonly studied probiotics that are out there that you're going to see more in like commercial, common commercial probiotics that are on the market. I do recommend, there's a few different companies that I like to use that a lot of them are physician only, but it's only because they have higher concentrations of the probiotics, and I've used them clinically and I've seen that they work. But there are some other ones that are commonly found in foods that are good. And then there's it's actually a fungi. It's a Saccharomyces Bilardi, and Saccharomyces Bilardi is a fungal organism, and it tends to be associated too with better gut health and can be really helpful. It's not as sensitive to or it's not sensitive to like the antibiotics. If someone's taking like antibiotics or even herbal antimicrobials, it tends to be very resilient, and it can be very helpful at keeping the gut microbiome healthy. Now, you can't just take a lot of those things at one time. You want to take small quantities and work your way up. But so changing diet and supporting the gut with a healthy, diverse diet, diverse in color, diverse in fiber, adequate protein, good fats, and then eating fermented foods can be really helpful. Possibly taking supplemental probiotics and like Saccharomyces Bilardi, which is a fungal species. Those can all be helpful in supporting the gut microbiome. And then the third category of things are the postbiotics. Now, the postbiotics, what I like to do is I like to see if we can make changes with diet, and then sometimes probiotic supplementation, but a lot of times just food if the person can tolerate it. And then depending on how bad of an issue we're having, sometimes I'll recommend direct supplementation with butyrate, which is one of the short chain fatty acids that these probiotic bacteria make, and do that for a period of 4 to 8 weeks, maybe 12 weeks. And a lot of times that combination of things I have seen make huge differences in gut health, and then also in calming down the immune system. So overall, that's a pretty good strategy from what I've seen clinically. Are there other ways? Absolutely. I'm sure there are. Not everyone's going to respond to what I just mentioned, but those can be, in my experience, in my training, very effective ways to support inflammatory conditions. And I think that those are good things that people should be aware of and consider. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I hope this has been helpful in giving you some understanding of how the gut microbiome has really such a strong connection to the immune system and to inflammatory processes. And if your gut's not healthy, it can really lead to and perpetuate a lot of other diagnoses and disease processes. If you found this episode helpful, please share and leave a review. It really helps the podcast. And as always, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You can also follow us on YouTube and Facebook at the Office of Dr. Brad Shook. You can join our Facebook group, the Greater Hickory Thyroid Support Group, with over 11,000 members, and you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Brad Shook. And remember, together, we can make a difference. The main takeaway from today's podcast is getting your gut healthy is absolutely critical no matter what kind of health challenge you have. If you don't have a healthy digestive tract, then it can lead to and perpetuate a lot of other problems in your life. If you understand this, then it can help you to be healthier. I mean, almost no matter your circumstance. Even if you don't have any kind of health problems, if your gut's not healthy, you could probably do better. So I appreciate you joining me today and hanging out throughout this podcast. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me or my team, and we'll do the best that we can to help you. But until next time, have a great day, everybody. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed hanging out behind the scenes with Dr. Shook. You can also talk with and learn from Dr. Shook through Facebook Live on our Facebook page at the Office of Dr. Brad Shook. Don't forget, you can also get access to our videos, guidebooks, and thyroid programs at www.drbradshook.com. Oh yeah, and don't forget one more thing. We can change the world one person, one family, and one community at a time. Until next time, remember, today is your day, and no one will tell you who you are and what you can be.